Hi everyone, it's Liam here from Rating the Races. So we've had the Aintree Grand National Festival, a good week, or a good few days, probably culminating or highlighted with Korak Rambler, top rated on our ratings, and one of the horses that we highlighted in the video back in February said he'd go off favourite. He did go off favourite, and he won, which was excellent. But that's done. We've finished the race, so let's move on to talk about horses that could be interesting going forward, because that's really what you want to hear in these types of videos. You don't want to hear about successes, they're great, but we want to know what's going to win future races so that we can get our money on future winners. So let's start off with the 4-year-old juvenile Grade 1, which Zenta just narrowly beat Bo Zenith. Zenta is definitely the best of those two, though. She's got there too soon under Mark Wall. She travelled too well, hit the front, then Bo Zenith has managed to battle back, and then Zenta's battled back again right at the finish. I'm still pretty confident that Zenta will be definitely the best of this lot, and I still think is second best behind Lossymouth and in front of Gala Marceau. Willie's clearly got the best juveniles, but going on from this race, like where do they go? Last year's winners of this race were Knight Salute and Pay the Piper. Well, one ended up in a county hurdle and the other one didn't run, or might have done, and I can't even think where Knight Salute finished. It's not always a race that works out well. Yeah, I think Willie can keep his into Mare's company, but I think those behind might struggle next season once they go into open company. Move on to the 255, and we were on a Hoisinor here, which was quite frustrating in that he went 107 in the run. Do you know what? I think he's run potentially a career best here. He's gone really hard. It was quicker than last year's race. It was quicker than the year before. There's so many races that it was quicker than. And I think Hoisinor has done all of the donkey work up the front and has nearly managed to hold on. So what does that mean? In my opinion, I think that means Shishkin definitely stays. Shishkin, I would have no issues with him whatsoever running in the Gold Cup next year. He clearly stays and wants, potentially even further. King George, we'll probably see him in. We get there, Galopin de Champ. We could get Galopin de Champ, Brave Man's Game, if the issues are worked out with the ownership. Maybe Jerry Colombe could come over, and Shishkin, and what a King George that would be. But I wonder whether that might actually end up being too short for Shishkin. I think there might be something with a bit more speed. I think he wants, I think he wants a Gold Cup trip now, and I would take nothing away from a Hoisinor there. I think he's run a really, really good race, and any other year, I think he would have gone really close to probably winning it. I think he would have beaten Clan des Obeaux personally. I think Shishkin has run a huge performance here. A really, really good victory for Shishkin. Constitution Hill won. He was impressive, wasn't he? As per usual. I still think this is the plan. I've written a plan for Constitution Hill. Where to go next season? You start with a 2 mile 2 over fences. You then run in Grade 1s. You end up in the Champion Chase. The following year, you step him up and you end up in the Gold Cup. Obviously, next year they don't need to chase the Gold Cup, the King George or the Gold Cup, because they've probably got Shishkin now. So they don't need to chase that. They can give him a year to chase the Champion Chase, and then the following year you can start stepping Constitution Hill up. So moving on to what I believe was one of the first eye catchers of the meeting in the Close Brothers Red Rum Handicap Chase over 2 mile. And that horse that I really think is interesting is Pay the Piper. Finished 5th. He was the only horse to make up any ground, especially on day 1, from a long way back. If you go back to I think it's the 3rd last, he is, I think, about 8th or 9th, might even be further back than that. I think only Mackenberg is behind at that point. And the winner, the 2nd, the 3rd, they're all right up there. And nothing managed to pick up. I mean, Grey Diamond and, not Grey Diamond, sorry, Third Time Lucky travelled into it and started to move forward from a held up position. And then he faded because, it was so difficult to pick up from the back of the field. And Pay the Piper is on a really, really good race here for a never nearer 5th. If they go... if it was over 2.5, I think he would have gone a lot closer. But I don't think they need to step him up to 2.5. But there's definitely a race that they could aim him at. Potentially, just sitting again for that Scottish champion chase next year, the handicap, and then potentially coming back to Aintree straight from that. I mean, if you can find, you could potentially step him up to Grade 1 company now, get him into Grade 1 races, give him a few runs round. I mean, the Hamiltons do like to go quite high with their horses. They did with, what was his name? Tommy's Oscar. Run him in those types of races, so go for all the graded races. He'll end up back at the festival or back at Musselburgh off a similar mark to his Aintree mark. He could then win that and then come to Aintree, and I think he would have a really good chance at Aintree, because I can't imagine next season it's quite going to be as biased from the front. But Pay the Piper is definitely one I'll be watching out for early next season, if they run him in a race that looks like they might be actually going for it. Moving on to the bumper, it's good to see Top Rated win it. Our selection was a little bit frustrating. Really, really well supported. Went off 3-1 in the end. Jolie Coeur Hélène, and you can see actually traded just over even money, 2.18. So just a bit bigger, a little bit smaller than 5-4. No, 6-5. A little bit shorter than 6-5. Travelled really, really well when I first started under rules for Willie Mullins, and just hasn't quite got home. I do think she is very interesting. She's only a 4-year-old. A lot of the others were older. You can see that down here, a lot of 5s. She was the only 4-year-old. I think, personally, she'll still be the one that comes out of this race the best. Next season, definitely be looking at the Mares Novice Hurdles with her, potentially. Probably the Mares Novice Hurdles. I don't think I'd be aiming her at the Supreme. But I do think she's going to be that good. I really do believe that she's going to be a Cheltenham Aintree horse next season. Jolie Coeur Hélène for Willie Mullins and JP McManus. So don't give up on her if you've just backed her the once. Obviously, you shouldn't give up on horses after one run. Moving on to the 145. This was... So Dan Skelton and Harry Skelton had a good week. But this was one of their worst efforts with Galère de la Toe. I don't know what Harry was doing kicking on so early. It left the race set up perfectly for Jerry Colombe, who did win quite comfortably. Complete Unknown ran on, but Jerry Colombe, it was very, very impressive, wasn't he? And hopefully he'll end up as good enough in open company next season. I think he will be, and I think we'll end up seeing him in like the Gold Cup next season. There was nothing wrong with his effort at Cheltenham, and this was much, much better again. I think he's still improving, and clearly he's very, very talented. Moving on to the William Hill Handicap Hurdle. So I've got two here that I want to, if you haven't already got them in your notebooks, I think they should be added to your notebooks or your NAGMEs. The first one was 4th place Tritonic. I think the races will work out quite well. Fenner Cross was in a handicap for the first time. Buddy 1 was unexposed. Son and Gino was unexposed and was top rated. It's run a really good race. 4th place Tritonic has been disappointing this season. You can see his form is 0.985, so it's 0.9854 now, so he's just about getting there. That came off a mark of, I'm just going to very quickly check what that mark was. What was this mark? It came off a mark of 135. Now, I don't think the handicap is going to touch him. I think he's going to leave him on 135. But with that in mind, he won a race back in December 2021, the Betfair Exchange Trophy of 141. A 2-mile handicap at Ascot for 60 grand for the winner. That's where he's got to go back, isn't it, next season? Surely they go back for that race at Ascot. The Betfair Exchange Trophy, Grade 3 handicap hurdle, good prize money. He'll be off a good mark. He's clearly running into a little bit of form. He's coming back down to a workable mark. I think that's what it is for him. If the handicapper drops him any more, then I think he'll be absolutely thrown in for Ascot. The second horse I wanted to talk about was the horse back in 5th, the other Alan King runner, Harbour Lake. Now, he's quite unexposed. He's still learning his trade. He hasn't won since winning a lowly handicap hurdle at Market Raisin, but he's run some good races since then. He was 3rd in a Greatwood in November of last year. He was 4th in a decent race at Kempton, and then he was 5th at Aintree. Now, I think the big thing here is he wants further. Go back and watch the race. He travels into it quite nicely. You can see he shortens from 20.87 to 6.6 because he travelled into it, okay? And then he got caught for pace turning in. He just got, severely outpaced before running on strongly again. Because he's very lightly raced, he's only a 7-year-old, he's only had the 10 runs. I think there's more to come from him, and I definitely think there's more to come when they step him up in trip as well. And there's the Betfair Exchange Stayers handicap at Haydock over 3 mile. That's where I hope we see him next. I think that'll really suit him stepping up in distance. They might get a fitness run into him at the beginning of next season. If they do, and then they turn up at Haydock, Harbour Lake will definitely be in my calculations. Moving on to the Grade 1, the 2 mile Grade 1, it was great to see in the pocket Frank, the form of the Supreme Novice. I mean, our R figures kind of gave it away. They said that was a really good form. It was really good form. Found a 50. I did question that form, and he ran disappointingly. Strong leader, definitely go up in trip next season, won't he? Stayed on well. Lucia, she can stay in the mare's company next season. The horse that I'm interested in here is Pembroke. Now, I know I said this last beginning of this season or midway through this season. I don't think Pembroke is a 2 miler. I think Pembroke wants 2.5 mile, and I think he just got caught for pace again. He did make a mistake at the second last, but I don't think he has the pace to go with these. When he drops into a handicap, he's going to be very, very interesting. Obviously, they ran him in the county, and I don't think he had the pace for it. Go back up in trip to that 2.5 mile trip. If he turns up in a handicap next season, Dan Skelton likes full season plots. He did it with Langadan. He probably did it with, or he kind of did it with West Balboa. Only had the 2 runs. I really think that Pembroke can certainly win a race off his mark of 135. He just wants to go in a handicap company over 2.5 mile, and I think we'll see a really big performance from him over 2.5. And the Coral Cup is where I hope they end up with Pembroke. Moving on to the Topham. Now, this was a strange race because they didn't go slow first circuit, but it wasn't a super fast first circuit. Second circuit, they really quickened. They quickened, and it turned into a bit of a sprint rather than a stamina race. And I think that really affected the likes of Al Dancer and even more so Ashtown Lad, who travelled okay before not picking up, and Harry was very quick to pull him up. Don't give up on Ashtown Lad at all. I think he probably wants, he wants 3 mile plus or a really fast, well-run 2.5. 3 mile plus will be ideal. I looked at something like the Bet365, and I think that's going to come too soon for him. It's only 2 weeks' time. He does have an entry for it, so he would be interesting if he did turn up. But it's only 2 weeks, so it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't go for there this season. And they found something else. Maybe even like the Classic Chase next season for Ashtown Lad. It's at Warwick. The Skeltons love that. The trip should be fine, or the trip should really, really suit him. The 2.5 or 3.5, sorry, rather than the 4, which he didn't stay at Ayr in the Scottish National, and the Topham was probably too short. So Ashtown Lad's one not to give up on. And the second one, who I think is very interesting, and I thought he was given a terrible ride, was that French one for Willie Mullins, who finished 4th. Is it Huet en couleur? Huet en couleur, whatever that, however you say that. It's French, isn't it? And that's not Hout or... he's gone way too soon, hasn't he? He's kicked for home way too soon under Paul Townend, and has got tired late on. I think... I do wonder whether he's quite getting the trip. Maybe they might want to look at dropping him back to 2 mile and see what they can do in a 2 mile handicap. They've never really done that. They finished 6th in an Arkle, they finished 5th in an Arkle, and then they stepped him up for the John Durkan. I don't know what the Durkan was all about. He finished 4th behind Galopin des Champs. He then fell in a race with Fakadou de Ré. He then went 2.5 for Janadil, and then they've stayed 2.5. Yeah, might give him a drop back in trip, go 2 mile, go forward on him, and see what happens. He could be interesting next season over 2 mile, or if there's a handicap at Punchestown. Got to remember he's only 6, so he definitely has more to come when they find the right race and they give him the right ride. I think he was way too. Paul Tanner went way too early on him, unfortunately. Moving on to the 5:15, we had a good run from Washington. Sorry, look at that. He dropped, shortened in the run to 2-1 from his 11s. Blue King Daru shortened as well, travelled well. Punctuation in his defence. I mean, people say, where the hell did that run come from? Well, 2 runs ago, he went off favourite for a handicap at Cheltenham. In a race with Hacker de Plas and Mai Tai and Picard. Good race, nothing wrong with that. He went off favourite, didn't quite get home, or didn't quite have the skills that day or the ability to win it. And then he pulled up at Sandown in the Imperial Cup, but he was actually going all right when he got hampered by something running across him. I can't remember who it was. And they pulled him up, so it wasn't the biggest shock, although he went off 40-1. But it's definitely something we probably missed ourselves. Washington ran a really good race. I imagine they might try and target something a bit sooner next season rather than planning it all around this race at Aintree. Where could they go with him? There's a couple of races at Cheltenham. I think there's a Something Alloys handicap at Cheltenham in November that they might aim at. Yeah, he's run a really good race, but just not quite good enough on the day. Was Washington. Nothing really caught my eye in behind that. Moving on to yesterday, the Grand National Day. Started off, John Bon won it. Calico was going to run a good race when falling at the last. He was unlucky to come down. Calico's only rated 139. John Bon was rated 159 going into that. If they're nice and they let Calico off again with his mark, yeah, he's quite nicely handicapped, isn't he? I mean, he's won a handicap beating Pay the Piper, who was an eye catcher for us. He was second to John Bon. He was going to finish second to John Bon. He won a handicap at Southwell. He's probably not found his mark yet of 139 over this 2-mile trip. I think the 2-mile trip is what's really bringing out the best of him. 2 mile over fences, and his form is pretty good. Yeah, I'll be interested to see where they go with Calico. He's got to go into a handicap. Could they plan a whole season for Calico? Absolutely, it's the Skeltons. He is only 7, so they do have like a year to do that planning. He'd only be an 8-year-old if it all went wrong next season. Moving on to what's the next race we want to talk about? The 3-mile handicap hurdle. Now, this is an interesting one because I wonder whether there is a... So first of all, let's talk about Mill Green. He's finished 3rd at Cheltenham in the Pertemps final in 2022. He finished 3rd in this race at Aintree last year. He came back this season, finished 3rd in a qualifier at Pertemps qualifier. He finished 3rd at Cheltenham and he finished 3rd at Aintree. The last 5 races he's finished 3rd, and 4 of them have been at Aintree and Cheltenham. Super impressive, super consistent, and we had him RTR3, which is lovely. RTR3, he finished 3rd. The winner, West Balboa, very impressive, won it quite comfortably. That's going to ruin her mark, isn't it? She's going to go up, I reckon she'll go up £10 for that to 145. I just wonder whether she might be a horse for the Stayers Hurdle. They might try and find a one more race for her, a big handicap, possibly that Betfair Exchange Stayers Handicap Hurdle at Haydock. But yeah, I think she could be interesting in Stayers Hurdle Company. I think the Stayers Hurdle, which I'm going to come on to, is a bit of a mess still. I know Cider Burley's won again, but I think the races are being run in a weird way as well. But yeah, I think West Balboa could be genuinely good enough to step into graded company next season. She can definitely pick up a couple of mares graded races before potentially taking on the boys, maybe at Cheltenham or at Aintree next season. The Turners Novices Grade 1, the 2.5 hurdle. The horse I'm interested in here is the one that we highlighted, and that was Authorised Speed. You can see with the in-running low, he went down to 5.0 from 14.27 because he actually pulled his way into contention, pulled his way into a good position, and then didn't get home. Yeah, doesn't want 2.5 mile. He's got to drop back in a trip back to 2 mile. Where could they go with him? Well, I think they really liked him for the Tolworth. He got well supported yesterday for the Grade 1. He's finished 5th in a champion bumper. Greatwood Hurdle. Greatwood Hurdle, Betfair Hurdle. They're the 2 races you want to be targeting with Authorised Speed next season. He's finished 4th in a bumper at Newbury. He's won a bumper at Newbury. He's finished 5th at Cheltenham, as I said, in a bumper. He's got the form at Newbury and Cheltenham. Yeah, I'm really keen on Authorised Speed to be aimed at the Greatwood Hurdle and the Betfair Hurdle next season, back over 2 mile. Moving on to the Stayers Hurdle, which I think was one of these very poor rides. I think there was a few poor rides. This one was another one from Danny Mullins on Flooring Porter. Why? I mean, if you listen to the commentary, Ruby Walsh said, "Oh, they've gone quite hard here. He's going to want to get a breather into Flooring Porter." Danny Mullins didn't. He didn't even try. He actually quickened it again, and to then only be beaten. I know he's ended up being beaten nearly 10 lengths, but he's finished 3rd again. He's got everything else beat apart from Marie's Rock, who's travelled beautifully, and Cider Burley, who's picked up because he clearly stays further than this 3 mile trip. I think Flooring Porter's run a really good race again to finish 3rd. And they've just got to be a little bit more conservative. They go to the front and then they can just ease down a little bit. Just, they don't have to go so hard and keep pushing it the whole way. They can start turning the screw on the second lap round. Second circuit, then you start winding up and getting horses off the bridle. Danny Mullins said in his interview afterwards, "We didn't want to get caught out by a horse who had more speed." It's a 3 mile race. I mean, it shouldn't really come down to speed if you've gone an okay speed for most of it and wound it up on the second circuit. Danny Mullins is riding this like the horse wants 5 miles and he has absolutely no turn of foot whatsoever. I completely disagree there. He just needs to be in front and just not go as hard. I think he's very interesting. He's actually 25 to 1 for next year's Stayers Hurdle. He's only 8. It's not like he's done and finished with at all. Cider Burley will be 12 next season. It wouldn't surprise me if we got a different Cider Burley next season. It could be really disappointing. And just finding that age is catching up with him. Flooring Porter is only 8. He's definitely not too old. And I think he'll go off, around 5, 6 to 1 sort of thing next year for the Stayers Hurdle again. He got back to this season. He got back to at Aintree. They clearly think a lot of him still, and he just needs to be given a slightly more conservative ride from the front. Moving on to the William Hill Handicap Chase, I was a little bit frustrated here. I think Beauport was just moving into it nicely when he fell. I do think he's nicely handicapped. I think he was going to run a really big race here. I don't think the handicapper will move him. Where do you go with him? That would be the question. They've got to look at for something like 3 mile handicap somewhere. Maybe something like the Coral Trophy at Kempton in February, but it's a long time to wait. But I'm sure there's a 3 mile handicap that they can find before that. I'm just trying to think of, obviously there's a Swinley Chase at Ascot, that's a bit late in the season as well. They might aim him around a spring campaign again. Possibly did it this year. He won a race at Carlisle and then stepped up in class to races that he was never going to be good enough for. Yeah, I wonder whether they'll aim him for a spring campaign again, Beauport. But definitely keep an eye on him. He was just coming into it when he unfortunately fell. I think he got squeezed out a little bit and fell. About, 4 out, 5 out? It fell at the 15th is what I can read here, but I don't know how many fences there were. So, as I said, don't give up on Beauport. Moving on to the Grand National. Great to see Corach Rambler win. Good run from Gaylord de Menil. Good run from Mr. Coffee for a long way. Lamilos didn't stay. Delta Work was unlucky. He actually got bumped as he jumped a fence. And that caused the jockey to come out the side. And who was our other one? Oh yeah, we've mentioned him. So, where do they go from here? So Corach Rambler is going to go up in the handicap. He's going to go up again. And he's got to be running in graded races next season. He's got to be aimed at the Gold Cup. I think that's probably going to be him for a long time in handicaps now. Vanillier ran a really good race for second. I don't believe any of those behind could have been given better rides to get them closer to Corach Rambler. As soon as Corach Rambler actually hit the front, he stuck his head up in the air. I think if he'd been weighted with and horses had been with him, Corach Rambler would have still beaten them. So Vanillier, ran a good race for second, stayed on nicely, picked up well. He's only 8, probably come back. Gaillard de Menil, similar. He's now finished 3rd in an Irish National and an English National. Yeah, did nothing wrong. He's only 7. All depends on the handicap mark. Noble Yates has found it just slightly too fast for him with that weight on. So the horses that I'm interested in going forward, though. Gaillard de Menil, definitely. He's only 7. Could be interesting. I then want to add Mr. Coffee. So for me, I actually think Nicky de Boinville gave him a bad ride. Not a good ride, like especially like Nicky Henderson has said. He went way too early. He did a Black Lion when Sam Twiston-Davis rode it. Interestingly, Lucinda and Derek Fox came through and won that as well. But yeah, if you're hitting the front, 5 out sort of thing and going for it, you're going too early. It's 4 mile 2, not 3 mile 5 race. Yeah, it went too early. Ran a really good race for a long way though, and he is, as I said, he's only 8. He's still got time. I think they'll come back next year. And they need to run him in races that he probably can't win. I mean, he ran off, like, they don't need to get his handicap mark down anymore. They just need to leave it at 145. I wouldn't be playing around and trying to get him down a few pounds just in case they then missed out. I think if you wanted to find a race that he could win, I think the Midlands National back at Uttoxeter would be a race he could win. But I just wonder whether they aim him quite high. Potentially, beginning of next season, they could look at the Ladbroke Trophy or the Coral Gold Cup at Newbury. That would make sense. It's a big feature handicap. And I think that's where we might see him in those types of races before returning for this race. If he returned off that mark, 145, I'd actually be quite keen on Mr. Coffee again, just because I think Nicky de Boinville will know in his head, I went too soon. And if he'd left his challenge a little bit later, I think he could have gone really close, to be honest. Other horses that are interesting. Lamilos hasn't stayed this trip. Definitely stays 3 mile 2 and that sort of trip. The Coral Gold Cup again could be a target. I also wondered about the Bet365 with him, but I just think that might come too soon for him after finishing the National. At least with their other horse, Ashtown Lad, he didn't finish the Topham. So he didn't finish a 2 mile 5 race. He's probably could get over that, whereas Lamilos I don't think could, so I wouldn't be rushing him back. But he's definitely interesting over slightly shorter distance. He didn't stay the Aintree trip, what was that, 4 mile 2. He didn't stay 4 mile 2, but 3.5 mile I think is where you probably see him. And yeah, maybe the Welsh National. Maybe the Welsh National might be a target for him. Others that caught my eye a bit further down. That's probably it. Any second now. Delta Works, goes for the cross country again next year as an 11-year-old and wins it. He's probably had his chance to win this race now. Anything else? No. So the ones I'm interested in, Gaillard de Menil, just keep an eye on what they do with his handicap mark and where he ends up. Mr. Coffee, probably be targeted for this race next year and doesn't need as hard a ride. Lamilos could be a Welsh National horse. I do think his mark is workable, and yeah, they're the main ones. I think if I catch any others, I will talk about them in other videos. And moving on to the final race of the day, I didn't find anything interesting here. Paul Lafille travelled okay. She came into it. He came into it quite nicely, but then didn't really find a lot, and that was a bit disappointing for us to end the card. But we had a good week. Plenty of winners. Another big handicap winner. We've done the Lincoln, we've done the Grand National, we've done the Swinley, the Coral Cup, the Ultima, the Martin Pike. We found the winners of big handicaps, the William Hill Hurdle, whatever it was. This one here, Village Hotels Handicap Hurdle. So we've had a good week, and it's on to Cheltenham on Wednesday and Thursday. We've got the Craven and the Nell Gwyn at Newmarket. Next Saturday it's the Scottish National. I do like one for that, and I do like one for the Scottish Champion Hurdle already. Both of them I'm pretty confident, will be declared, and that might come in a video later this week. Thanks for listening. Hope you've had a great week and you had some winners, and hopefully plenty of you followed in on Correct Rambler.